coming up next on The Health Hustle.
Did you fundamentally change as a human after you did it?
Yes.
In which ways?
I think my understanding of reality changed. Before that, and there was a little bit of sadness coming out of this ceremony, I'll be honest with you, because I felt like, how did I make it nearly 30 years with such a limited view of what this is?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, okay. That's not what I expected.
Yeah, I thought like,
I'm
oh my
36
God.
and I have no idea.
I've been living this life where I thought that that reality is just what we see in front of us and
Totally.
we can observe with our senses. And that took me to this place where there was so much beneath the surface. Like imagine like an iceberg. It's like everything is below the surface. So that changed me. And I guess practically what that actually meant for me is it took the pressure off of life in a lot of ways. I realized that a lot of the things that I had been stressed over, anxious over, were not important. They were petty. And I realized that like this game is like this life is in a lot of ways a game. And it should be treated as such. It should be playful. We should enjoy it. We should laugh at it. And anytime I feel myself getting caught up in that old way, I try to remind myself of what I remembered about myself and reality in that experience. Because I do think of it as a remembering. I think that we all have that understanding when we come into the world. But we forget it. We get conditioned. We get normalized.
What up, y'all? Corey here. On today's episode, I got a chance to hash it out with my good buddy Henry Winslow, who is a founder of a newsletter business called Tricycle, which talks about all things related to psychedelics. And you can already imagine why I had such a fun time on this conversation, especially from the fact that he grew up with two parents who are MD doctors. He went to Harvard University. He was the world champion of yoga. Who knew there was even competitions for yoga? And he started a whole slew of side hustles and weird businesses before he ultimately ended up on starting a newsletter business which has over 46,000 and growing subscribers. And we get into all the nitty-gritty as to how he built it, some of the things he learned early on and the mistakes he made in earlier businesses, and many of the lessons learned from doing psychedelics himself and what he's learned about himself, what he's learned about humanity, what he's learned about just the reality and the nature of reality, and so many other things. And so I think you guys are really going to enjoy this episode, and so check it out. One last thing, if you're a health or fitness professional and you're having difficulties getting leads, one of the most common reasons that I see this is not having a well-defined niche. If you go to the link in the description, I have a free 3-step process that walks you through exactly how to get clarity on which niche is best suited for you and your business. Without further ado, let's go. Henry Winslow, welcome to the show. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. I've got my Olipop in hand, so I can't complain.
Love that. So you have an interesting background, and I'll be honest, you're kind of a hidden savage. As I did some research on you, there's a history to you that led you to where you are today that I find very amusing. From having parents that are doctors, from going to Harvard, from a yoga career, to psychedelics, to now a newsletter business.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to cover
Okay.
what we can in between and a lot of the lessons learned along the way.
Yeah.
But where I'd like to start is a conversation you and I actually had at South by about the naming of your newsletter business and where that comes from and how that's essentially a nod to the psychedelic world.
Yeah.
We don't have to get too deep into the psychedelic world, but I would love just the story as to how you decided to name the newsletter what it is.
Okay. The name of the newsletter is Tricycle Day, which to the uninitiated feels like a total random combination of words with no connection to psychedelics whatsoever. However, like you said, it's sort of an Easter egg. It's a nod to those in the know. There is sort of a subculture holiday in the psychedelic scene called Bicycle Day. And Bicycle Day is the name for April 19th, which is the anniversary of Albert Hofmann's first intentional self-dosing of LSD. He was the Swiss chemist who accidentally discovered acid. So he was, back then, a lot of scientists would just take the drugs that they were developing on themselves before putting them through a clinical trial or something like that. So he started tripping on acid, and he went home from his laboratory on his bike, and then the walls of reality started melting down, and it's been a holiday ever since. So I took that, put a little twist on it, and the reason why tricycle rather than bicycle is a tricycle is easier to ride than a bicycle. And my newsletter is about making psychedelic education accessible.
Have you participated in Bicycle Day yourself?
I have never ridden a bicycle while tripping, if that's what you mean. No, I haven't.
Yeah, I don't know how safe of an experience that would be, but
Yeah.
it is an interesting story. Well, thank you. That I had to start there because when you told me that, I learned so many fun facts about where LSD comes from and that there's this weird inner world of Bicycle Day celebratory people, and so I appreciate that.
Yeah, actually, and some people do celebrate it in a kind of on-the-nose way. I think last year I came across, there was a big gathering in San Francisco. People did like a big ride together, and the unspoken subtext was that I think a lot of them were probably tripping.
Well, you have to participate in that one of these years.
Yeah.
Okay, well, cool. Thank you. I wanted to circle back then to, you grew up in Virginia, 2 parents that were doctors. Let's start there.
Okay.
Did you have any sort of entrepreneurship in your family, and or what did you learn from your parents in terms of growing up 2 doctors in the household, and how did that form you today?
Yeah. I did have entrepreneurship in the household. My dad ran his own private practice, but it was never positioned that way to me. He never talked about himself as being a business owner. He identified as a doctor. So it's not something that I really thought about much as a child, and it was definitely not an obvious career path. I was pretty much on the straight and narrow, gonna be a doctor too. Not because my parents so much overtly pushed it, but just that those were the role models that I had in front of me, and it was the picture of traditional success.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters.
Anybody a doctor?
1.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do they like it?
Sort of. Yeah. I think she's a dermatologist pathologist, a dermatopath. So she's not a clinician. She doesn't work with patients. She looks at samples. If you get something clipped off of your skin to send to a lab, she's the person who's looking at that to see if it's cancerous.
Did your parents want everybody to go on to be doctors because they were?
I definitely think that they are happy that at least one person did. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think they still feel that way?
Like you should
have
done that? No. And the reason I say that is because I was planning to be a doctor. I always kind of identified as a math and science kid growing up, and I went into Harvard, as you mentioned. I was on the pre-med path. I started with my major as molecular and cellular biology. And then my first summer back home, instead of getting an internship at a bank or something, I went and worked at my dad's practice doing clinical administrative stuff. And it was my first opportunity to really speak to other people and get an objective point of view, because every conversation I had with my own parents was colored by that relationship.
This is the best thing ever. You should do it.
Not even so much that. It's just normalized. This is what we do, So when I actually started talking to his partners or other people that were healthcare professionals, a lot of them were a little bit more frank, they're just hey, this isn't the career that it used to be. It's a lot of dealing with insurance companies and just a lot of headache around access and reimbursement. It used to be about helping people. Now, private equity groups are coming in and rolling up these practices and trying to squeeze every dollar out of them. And it's changing rapidly. Maybe you don't want to do this.
That's exactly what happened to me with occupational therapy, man. I made the silly mistake of not really getting a hands-on experience of what that career would look like before actually getting into it. And then when I got into it, I had that exact same experience of oh, this isn't actually about patient care at all. Mm-hmm. And I hated every second of it once I get into it. But so you mentioned something, normalizing. I love that concept a lot because it's something that I've continued to realize more and more in my life, is that getting around the people and the environments that are, to some, might seem crazy or odd or unattainable, but getting around it normalizes it, and it does something crazy to the brain that makes it feel real. Growing up in a household with 2 parents that are doctors, for you, being a doctor felt yeah, that's what everybody does. Everyone
Yeah.
becomes doctors,
Yeah.
right? Versus somebody else that never had that experience, or name your thing, whatever, lawyers or entrepreneurs or whatever, is when you don't have that normalization process, it's scary. And it's like, how does anybody do that? How could I ever accomplish that? So I love that. It's one of the reasons I love living in Austin, is like, there's a lot of people that are doing things that would most people be like, how could you possibly do that? But then when you meet them, you're like, oh, this is normal.
Yes.
And I could totally accomplish that. Have you had experiences like that in your own life?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's interesting, even the way they were reflecting it back to me, because I think for a lot of people, like, becoming a doctor is really aspirational, you know?
Very.
Like, yeah. That's like a dream job.
Totally.
But for me, it was just like table stakes. And that gave me the perspective to be like, the come to Jesus moment was like, this actually is not like a great path for me, maybe. But yeah, being able to put yourself in the vicinity, just the physical proximity of someone who's doing something that feels far off or intimidating suddenly makes it feel doable. Yeah, I totally agree. There's something like neurologically that happens, I think. You know, I have a 18-month-old son now, so I think a lot about development. And there are these things called like mirror neurons. When you see somebody else do something, you're able to connect and do it. Even if you were aware that was something that was possible, seeing someone else do it actually changes your brain.
It's one of the powers, I feel like, one of the goods, I guess, that's come from a lot of the social media stuff, is that I subconsciously often compare myself, I think we all do, to what we see on social media. And I think that there could be the downside of that, of not feeling good enough. But I've found a lot of good from it, of it actually motivates me in a lot of ways. Of whenever, like literally this last weekend, I competed in High Rocks in Houston, and food poisoning, severe diarrhea. It was the hardest workout I've ever done in my entire life, hands down, no question. But the weird thing that was going on in my brain as I was trying not to poop my pants for this hour-long workout was I had just recently watched a YouTube video of this girl, Sally. She goes by like the Yellow Runner, and she did like a 240-mile Moab or something like that. And so it took her, I think, 4 days to complete this race.
Crazy.
And so, right. And so in my brain, like that's my comparison though, right? Is like, I see that. So then in my head, I'm like, I can't handle an hour of not wanting to shit my pants when somebody can run 4 days. And there were times during that race where she was throwing up and she couldn't eat and she couldn't keep water down. And it's like, who am I to complain?
Yeah.
Right?
So did you shit your pants?
I got very close. Well, I take it back. I did shit my pants, but not during the race.
Okay. All right. You made it through. After that, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I did actually, not gonna lie. It was actually, I was standing, so stupid. Me and my partner who I competed with, we were walking through town in Houston, and unfortunately when you're downtown, you can't just like pop into anywhere and use their bathroom.
Yeah.
Classic downtown, right? And all of a sudden, like the light turned green, and my buddy starts walking across the street, and then I just stopped because I was like, I can't. If I move, I have to unclench my butt cheeks.
Yeah.
And he walks across the street, and all of a sudden he stops and looks back at me. He's like, "You all right, dude?" I was like, "Not all right, dude." I definitely didn't keep it all in. Let's just say that. But yeah, lesson learned.
There you go. Yeah.
This is not a podcast about pooping your pants. Moving on.
Hey, a worthwhile detour.
Worth moving on. All right. So you went to school in Harvard. Curious, what was the appeal to Harvard, and what you studied? History, I believe it was. Science and history?
I studied the history of science.
Okay.
But like I said, I started on the pre-med path, and I was doing molecular and cellular biology. It was after that, those transformative conversations in that internship, that I decided I did not want to be a doctor. So I'm at this liberal arts school. Let's like kind of shift to the strengths, which is not to say that the science program there is not great, but like, let's look at maybe some of the more anthropological sides. And I found my way to the history of science, and health policy. And I was still very much interested in working in some way, shape, or form in health. And to this day, I am, so yeah, I studied history of science, and within that field, I kind of focused on more recent history. It's like a pretty broad, even though it's like kind of an uncommon field of study, it's very broad. Like you could be looking at like dark ages witchcraft, and that's the history of science too. But I was more interested in like the development of industry around science and engineering, and specifically the pharmaceutical industry. And that's where I ended up working afterward.
Tell me more about your Harvard experience. Good, bad? Was it worth it? Why did you want to go to Harvard?
Well, my dad went to Harvard.
Of course he did.
Yeah. So that was, again, following in the footsteps, normalize.
Yeah.
But actually, that was one thing where it was not normalized. Like, I knew that was exceptional that he went there, and I did not anticipate following in his footsteps in that sense. I was pretty sure I was going to go to UVA. I went to a school where 30% of the graduating class went there, which is a great school. But I also was interested in getting out of my shelter, going to a different physical location, and was interested in bigger cities, and was entertaining Boston University. And my dad said hey, if you're going to apply to school in Boston, you got to apply to Harvard. And as luck would have it, I got in. So
what do you mean by luck would have it? How did you get into Harvard?
I mean, there's a lot of luck involved. I mean, there are far fewer spaces there than there are qualified applicants.
Totally.
So it does take a lot of luck. And for me, I absolutely appreciate that being a legacy was, that's a mark in my favor that you got to take everything you can get.
Totally. Why do you think they picked you though? What? I mean, you obviously must have been.
I mean, I had great grades
sure.
and everything at school. I think that they, something they always say is they're looking for people who are going to be leaders. That's what they look for. So I think, having good grades is kind of table stakes, but you also have to show that, you showed leadership in your early age. So I was captain of sports teams, and I was the president of the French club and all that kind of stuff.
Because you swam, right? Swam and dove?
Yes.
Okay.
And ran cross country and track.
All at Harvard?
No.
Swam?
At Harvard, I just dove.
Okay.
And I swam a few events, but that was kind of an anomaly.
Okay. Because did I read it correctly? Crocodiles? Something like that? Were you part of the Crocodiles? Is that a thing?
The Crocodillos.
Crocodillos.
It's the oldest a cappella group at Harvard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of interesting extracurriculars.
Yeah. Okay. I saw it as an opportunity for that.
Yeah.
Obviously it's a great academic institution, but I think the biggest value at a place like Harvard is who you meet.
Totally.
Yeah.
1,000%. Especially nowadays. I mean, there was for sure a time and place where there was, red tape or barriers to certain education and certain knowledge. I feel like most of that, for the most part, has gone out the window. I feel like anything you've ever wanted to learn now is, for the most part, accessible.
Yeah. I
think really the value, I was saying the same thing to you when we talked at South by, was I don't find that much value, honestly, in a lot of the talks or panels for that much. For me, it's just the people that I get to meet and connect and network with, just because
information's open access today.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Do you still, did any of those relationships at Harvard lead to anything for you in particular?
Well, yeah. One of my roommates, it was through talking
Mark
to him.
Zuckerberg. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Just happened to hang out with Mark Zuckerberg.
Just happened to hang out with him and been to the.
Because fun fact, actually, what year? I don't even know what that was. That was the earlier days of Facebook, right? Because when did you go to Harvard?
I was a little bit later.
Later.
He was there in, I think it was 2004 that he started the project that ended up evolving into Facebook, and I was there 2007 to 2011.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, certainly a lot of things came out of my relationships there. One that is very obvious because it was so immediate was when I came back from that summer where I decided I didn't want to be a doctor anymore. I was kind of talking with my roommate about it, and his mom had a really interesting career. She was on the pharmaceutical R&D team at Merck that developed Gardasil, which was the vaccine for HPV. Really important vaccine for women, but also men can carry this virus even if it doesn't turn into any symptomology. And my roommate, her son, was one of the first ever men to get the vaccine. But she actually, the part of her career that's interesting is she started in R&D as a scientist and then pivoted over to marketing. And I told her I was interested in the business of health, and she said, "Did you know that there's this whole like pocket of the creative agency world that's focused on healthcare and pharmaceuticals?" And I said, "No, that's definitely interesting." She put me in touch with their agency of record for Gardasil, and that's what turned me on to this whole this group of agencies that was mostly concentrated in Manhattan, which is where I wanted to go after school. And I ended up working in that circle for a while, hopping between agencies.
What was your experience like working, doing marketing for big pharmaceutical healthcare companies?
It's nothing like what I've done in my own scrappier side projects and full-fledged entrepreneurship projects. Very much mired in red tape, which I think is a good thing. People hate on pharmaceutical companies, but a lot of that hate is warranted. I'll be the first to say that. But they are subject to a lot of regulation. So they got to move really slowly. They have huge budgets. And a lot of the marketing that they do is old-fashioned. Not a lot of room for social media type stuff because of how careful they have to be around messaging and interacting with you have to report every adverse event that's ever cited by a user. So if you open the floor for that kind of commentary, then that just creates a lot of work. They're still working through old school, field forces. A lot of the marketing work we did was creating sales collateral for sales teams to go and call on doctors in office.
Do you think they're wasting their money / time doing it that way still?
There's a lot of wastage. Yeah. But I don't think it's necessarily because of the tactical choices they make. It's more because of the bloat of the organizations.
Tell me more. What do you mean by that?
Oh, just like, we'll be working with, as an agency, you'll work with like a brand manager, and they're leading the project, and, you create the creative brief, they sign off on it, then you got the creative team, they're actually putting together the copy and design, and then you show them a version, they say, yes, this is great. Then they got to like socialize it up the ladder, and their boss says like, well, actually, this is bad because we're changing this direction, and you got to start all over, and all those hours are billed. And there's just a million checkpoints like that. There's like at the brand level, and then also there's a lot of tension within the organization, because the way this works, this is actually kind of interesting. At pharmaceutical companies, they've got like the marketing teams, and they're pushing for the most aggressive thing that they can do.
Totally.
And then they have a med legal regulatory group that essentially plays the role of like FDA. And they say, you can't say this because of X, Y, and Z. And they're trying to protect like liability. So those two are like going at it, and the agency is caught in the middle. Like they bring the agencies to these legal review meetings, and we have to like help the brand managers like push for what they want to get in the piece.
I would hate that.
Yeah, it's super awkward sometimes.
Especially as a creative or marketing team person, I would hate that. I think about that even when I have teams that are more than like, I don't even know, 4, maybe 5 people. It's one of the reasons that I primarily work with small businesses and I don't start dabbling into more like hospitals or larger clinics, is because that's what happens. Is all of a sudden you have 30 opinions and everything gets knocked down one way or the other for whatever frickin' reason that anybody wants. It's just not a fun game to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long did you do it?
Off and on for like 10 years.
Damn.
Yeah.
How did you stick it out that long?
By entertaining myself with other projects on the side.
Like entrepreneurship, side hustle type stuff?
Yeah.
Anything glaring that stands out?
Many. I mean, my first, so I read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and it changed my life, just like everybody else who read it. And the first project that I spun out after being inspired by that book was, okay, I'm going to do an e-commerce site. I'm going to create like a super niche product.
Supplements.
Nope, not supplements. I'll do you way better than supplements.
Let's hear it.
So I was like very into my yoga practice, which is something we haven't talked about yet, but I had already become like fully immersed in that. I was very dedicated, practicing every day. And along with getting into that culture, I started becoming exposed to like the kind of woo-woo neo-spiritual world. And my then girlfriend, who is now my wife, was like into crystals, okay? And so I thought, okay, there's something here. Like, she's not the only one. She's got all these friends that are super into crystals. What can I do with crystals here? This feels like a high-margin business, right? So I created crystal healing kits for pets.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Tell me it worked.
It worked. It definitely worked. I just didn't know the first thing about how to acquire a customer. So the fact that I had that disadvantage and it still actually made money is kind of a testament. So like, I think I was just like, if I were to try to do that today, I think it could be a knockout success. Maybe it's a little too late at this point, but there was something there.
All right, for anybody listening, if you want to get into crystals for pets,
Yeah, go for it. Do it.
huge business opportunity.
Huge.
What else do you got?
Massive TAM.
What else do you got? How many of these side projects did you dabble in?
I don't know. I've lost count.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I mean, I've tried a bunch of things. Many of them didn't work, you know. That one didn't really work. I mean, it didn't really amount to anything, but I learned something. And that's how I think about it. You know, every project is an opportunity to learn something. The next thing that I did.
Pause. Before you tell me the next one, do you think with any of these projects, do you think it was because it was a bad idea, or do you think it was because bad execution, and which one played the bigger part?
I think, like I said, I think that crystal healing kits for pets actually was a good idea. I think it was bad execution just because I didn't have the skills. These days, to do e-commerce well, you have to know how to use paid acquisition to acquire a customer and just like figure out the lifetime value, figure out the cash flow, and just get that ratio right, lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. I didn't know the first thing about that back then, either like that concept or how to go about doing it.
I hear that a lot now. Okay, second one. What was
Second one was, so I thought like, okay, my problem with the crystal healing kits for pets was I was running it off of Shopify and there was no way for people to learn about my product. So I said, okay, let's do Amazon. Like Amazon is like this place where people find products, you know, they handle all the fulfillment for you. It's kind of like perfect. I don't have to figure out who's going to drop ship or anything. So I scratched another itch. You know, another hobby that I had developed was, I was starting to brew my own kombucha. Okay. And brewing a kombucha is really fun. It's one of these hobbies that people get really passionate about. They get really nerdy about it, which is always a good sign for a business, I think. And the struggle that I had come across was the variability in temperature, like ambient temperature, would really change how long it took to ferment the kombucha. And so I kind of like started researching around how people were handling that, and there wasn't much that was coming up, but I saw that people were brewing beer and they had used this thing that's like a wraparound heating device, like a coil that they would put around the brew vessel and it would maintain a consistent temperature. And I said, nobody's doing this for kombucha. Let me just take that product and put a little twist on it. Mostly branding, but there were some slight actual product feature changes. Worked with a manufacturer in China to do that and then sold it on Amazon. And I was actually living off of the income from that business for a little while.
What happened?
I ended up deciding that inventory business was not for me because it was too difficult to manage taking money out of the business to live off of and hampering the growth. Because what I would want to do is reinvest all that money back in to make bigger orders to get the margins better.
Totally.
And also Amazon does take quite a lot of fees.
I was going to say, I feel like the challenge with that one would be the margin. I think that's the thing everyone deals with when they're dealing with Amazon.
Yeah. My margin was not bad though, because I was like the only product in my space.
Huh.
Yeah. For a while. And then also the other thing that kind of put the nail in the coffin for me was the Chinese manufacturers, I think, cut me out and just put up a competitive product.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if it was my supplier directly or some other company that saw it and they just copied it, you know?
I feel like that's turned into the game of Amazon. I have a buddy of mine that's been his primary business is basically that exactly, is like finding products and just like basically playing like mathematical statistical games of like, how can you change the price with this product and recreate it and like take a little bit more of a margin cut and yada yada.
It's a race to the bottom.
It literally is.
Yeah.
Which is a game I do not want to play.
Yeah, because you just might win.
Yeah. Literally. All right, that's two. How many you got here? Keep them coming. These are great.
The next one after that was, okay, I was like, all right, so now I know what's wrong with Amazon. Let me go back to doing my own hosted store. So I did one more e-commerce project, and it was my first, like, I would say like big win, though it did not last. I took a course on how to run an e-commerce store effectively, which included how to run Facebook ads. And that was the key that unlocked the whole kingdom. So I did like a drop shipping store, and I found my niche in kind of like boho chic, woo-woo spiritual kind of home decor. And I had this one winning product, which was like an elephant tapestry. And I got the price to just the right point, where it had like a margin I could sustain. And I just hammered the ads for that one ad, or for that one product, and did something like $200,000 top line gross in like 2 or 3 months. And then it eventually withered away, but I couldn't find another product. But so I kind of put that to bed. But
People just stopped buying it? Why did it go away?
The ad fatigued, and I couldn't like refresh the creative in a way that got it back alive. And and like the key to that business, I think, is being able to reproduce, you know, the winning product. Like find something, once one thing dies off, you got to be able to find another product that you can drive ads to profitably. And I just like couldn't find another one. But I learned a lot from that. And from that, my biggest takeaway was like how to run Facebook ads.
Were most of your ideas product businesses?
Those first 3 were, yeah.
Did you stick to the product route, or did you go somewhere into the service?
Well, at a certain point, I went full into my yoga teaching.
Got it.
Yeah, which was not a product.
How did you originally get into yoga on that topic?
I originally got into yoga because I had been an athlete growing up. I had been a springboard diver, even through college. And when I moved to New York, I wanted a way to stay active, but also to like be acrobatic. That was something that was really, appealing to me. I always liked doing flips and twists and tricks. And someone I knew from diving brought me to a yoga class and said, "You're going to love this because you can do handstands and stuff." And that was appealing to me, but it was also immediately apparent, like from my very first class, that I was getting something like healing on a deeper level. And so that's what brought me back. I was able to like get a workout, but also it was like touching me in a deeper way that I didn't even know I needed. So yeah, that's how I got into it. And like within a few months, I was an everyday yoga practitioner.
Because you won the World Championship of Yoga, Beijing.
Yeah.
Did that happen to be the video that I watched of like, it's like 2 minutes of you doing yoga on YouTube?
There are a few videos of me doing 2 minutes or so of yoga on YouTube. But it might've been that one. There's a whole competitive circuit, which, when people hear about this, they're like, what? Competitive yoga? Yoga is not competitive. Yoga is like an inner journey. And my answer to that is yes, you're right. You're absolutely
Both
right.
and, yes.
But yeah, I mean, like historically there have been yoga competitions, like even in India for generations. So there's history to it. And also it's narrowly focused on the asana piece of yoga, which is just the physical postures. And it's only like scratching the surface of what the yoga practice is about. That's what the competition is for.
And is it mainly just about how flexible and mobile and controlled you are?
Yeah. It's flexibility, strength, balance, and control, or would be like, I would say the 4 elements of it.
Are you naturally hypermobile, or have you trained yourself to be that fucking flexible?
Definitely. I think it's a combination of both. Like everybody has a different level of predisposition, but I've trained a lot, and my body has changed a lot over the years of practicing yoga.
And are you still pushing your body to those limits of mobility?
Not so much anymore.
Was there like injury or health implications?
No. Fortunately, never had an injury.
I can't imagine. I mean, it's like everyone tells you like stretch so you don't get injured. You're like the 10 out of 10 stretch of like
People do get injured doing yoga though.
Really?
Yeah. When they push it and they're not listening to their body. I've always kind of seen yoga as a therapeutic practice, but when you get caught up in that competitive scene, it's easy to lose sight of that.
That's so wild to me.
Yeah.
And you don't compete anymore though?
No, after I made it all the way to the internationals and won, I was like, okay, I can only go down from here. So I'll retire from the competitive circuit.
What do you win when you win? A high five?
Recognition.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have people reach out? Like, was there fans of, oh my God, like you're the most amazing yogi
Well, actually, yeah, it did carry some clout in the yoga community for sure. And the reason why I think,
sponsorships?
No sponsorships, wow. But it did translate to more invitations to come do guest teaching gigs. Yeah, which was important to me in my business at the time.
I was going to say, so is this where it made sense to lean more into the yoga route in terms of a side business?
No, I was already full-time yoga at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
were you still practicing in pharmacy as well, or not practicing pharmacy, but doing brand? No, okay.
No.
So then yoga. Am I safe to say this eventually led you to discovering psychedelics?
You are correct about that. Yeah.
And how did that show up?
Yeah. So I'll say this. Many people find their way to psychedelics for many different reasons. The one that's getting the most playing time in the media right now is the mental health angle. And I actually think that is the most important and the most pressing usage or use case for psychedelics in this particular moment in time. But that was not my entry point. For me, it was an extension of my yoga practice. It was about self-recognition, self-understanding, spiritual insight, spiritual development. And in yoga, there's like this concept of samadhi. If you read the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is like one of the fundamental texts of yoga, it talks about an 8-fold path or 8-step process in yoga. Asana is the 4th step. So again, it's just like a small piece of the puzzle. And the last 3 steps are all stages of meditation. So it's dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Dharana is just like basically your ability to concentrate on something. Like, okay, I'm concentrating on that cell phone, right? I'm doing dharana. It could be a mantra that you repeat in your mind, or a visualization that you're focused on in your mind. The next stage is dhyana, which is cognitive absorption, where it's only that object in you. You eliminate all other distractions. And then the 3rd step, which feels like a massive leap from that second one. So the 3rd of the meditative and the 8th overall is samadhi. And samadhi is described as a non-dual state, meaning that the illusion of separation between the self and the other, anything outside of you, falls away. And you get to experience this kind of divine epiphany of unity, of a unity consciousness, that everything that we perceive around us, including ourselves, is just part of one thing, which is all that is. And that's like a really kind of difficult thing to intellectually grasp, but it was something that was very intriguing to me from the moment that I first came across it. I sort of resigned myself that I would never get to experience that directly, because this is like something that is the culmination of years of renunciated, devoted yoga practice from millennia ago. Like you kind of had to like fast and disappear into a cave and like withdraw from light and sound to have a chance of experiencing that. But I still thought it was really cool, and I was like reading about it. Then one day, one of my friends who was a yoga teacher also pitched me on a psychedelic ceremony. It was specifically with a medicine called Bufo alvarius. It's a secretion of a specific toad from the Sonoran Desert. But the active compound in it is 5-methoxy-DMT, 5-MeO-DMT. And I didn't know too much about psychedelics at that point, because I'd never really been like a big recreational drug user or like consciousness explorer. I was just kind of like happy doing my yoga practice. And but she basically pitched it as a shortcut to samadhi. So that was like, okay, I'm down. Let's do it. And within a week or two, I think it was like a week later, I was at this like Upper East Side apartment, doorman building, walking into this room that had been set up with a whole ceremonial container, getting ready to vaporize toad venom. And that's how I got into psychedelics.
Okay, go on. So far, this story is wild.
Yeah.
So many questions, but continue. I want to know, like, what was the experience like?
Okay.
What did you learn? What did you get out of it? Was it what you expected? Was it not what you expected?
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't do a ton of research going into it, because I limited myself to just speaking to the practitioner, the facilitator. He insisted on like kind of vetting everyone beforehand, which
How many people were there?
Just me.
Just you and him.
It was private.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some guy, some shaman, I assume?
So he's actually he was an ex-clinical psychiatrist. He used to be on the Western path. He was prescribing SSRIs benzodiazepines, all like the classic, psychoactive medications. And then he had his own personal awakening after experiencing the toad medicine. And he said, basically, fuck this. This is the way. And he's kind of a rogue cowboy in the psychedelic scene. I mean, this is a really powerful medicine, and it really should be used carefully and wisely, but he's very liberal with it, for better or worse.
Had you ever met him prior to this experience?
Just over the phone.
Okay.
So yeah, like I said, that was really the extent of my research into what the experience might look and feel like.
Sure.
And he gave me some reading, but he was like, basically, you should just come in with minimal expectations. Just know that you need to surrender. And I said, okay, yeah. And I took that to heart. But one of the things that I did see in the reading that he sent me was this idea of it being a death practice. Okay, so that was like, what does that mean? And a lot of what people report experiencing with 5-MeO-DMT is the experience of dying, like a genuine belief that you have died, and experienced what happens after death, and then come back to life.
Did you experience that?
I almost kind of wish that I had not read that beforehand, because I did experience that. But if I hadn't known that it might be coming, I feel like I might have believed it even more. So let me tell you about my experience. So first, it was really important to like set up the reverence around the medicine. So once I stepped into the room, it was like a whole energy shift. He was wearing ceremonial garb. There's this like beautiful golden retriever in there that just felt like such a comforting presence. He had me read a prayer, which I wish I could remember the exact words, but essentially the notion of it was, I forgive myself of anything I've ever judged myself about in my past. I accept myself in this moment, and anything that I ever do in the future is also perfect. I am like a creation of God, of the universe, and because of that, there's nothing to be ashamed of. And that really set the tone, I think. Then he told me how to actually ingest the medicine, which was he's going to put a certain amount of this like dried particulate that's been crackled up into a vaporizer pipe. He'll hold it to my lips, and he had me raise my arms overhead and draw as deep and slow a breath as possible until my hands touch. And I was like, okay, after that, what happens? Like, do I need to hold my breath? And he's just like, don't worry, after that, you're good. Just focus on doing that. Okay, so it gets to be that time. Then I draw the medicine in and fill my breath and close my eyes. And before I can even exhale, I'm transported to another dimension. I felt like a weight in my heart center getting pulled down. I felt this like heaviness. It pulled down like into the center of the earth, or even into the center of the universe, as my sensation of having a body kind of evaporated. My mind is still working at this point. My mind still has a voice, like an inner dialogue. And I felt a lot of terror. I felt a lot of terror. It felt like, what have I done? Like maybe I am dying.
For sure.
Because I'm losing my sense of an ego, like a sense of an I. And fortunately, this medicine, for better or worse, is so strong and so potent. And now I have the benefit of being able to compare that to other psychedelics, and it is certainly the strongest I've ever experienced. It's so fast that it's actually kind of difficult to resist. Like it was really obvious to me that resistance of the experience was going to be futile. So because of that, it was easier to surrender. And as soon as I did surrender to what was happening, like the weight went away, and I just became expansive, like beyond like infinity. And the last thing that my mind said, that inner voice in my mind said, was, "You made it. Nothing else matters. This is the purpose of existing. This is why you have consciousness, is to feel this level of bliss, of love, of total acceptance."
Is there any level of you wanting to continue to experience that? Like, is there like an addictive level to that? Is like you have that level of extreme bliss and you just want to keep tapping into it? Like, what did it teach you about yourself?
I think that could certainly be one risk. These substances are kind of like, they're well studied at this point. And not only are they have they been shown to be non-addictive? They're actually anti-addictive. So they're actually being used for substance use disorder treatment. And that's a whole other conversation we can talk about. But I think part of the reason why they are not mostly for the most part are not addictive is because the experiences, although beneficial, are very difficult. They take a lot out of you emotionally.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, how often could somebody do something like this?
I mean, you could do it theoretically all the time. I mean, and some of these practitioners, I think they're on the edge of maybe doing it too much. You know, if you're facilitating and you're taking the medicine every day, I mean, I'm not going to judge, but that's not something I would want to do.
Did you fundamentally change as a human after you did it?
Yes.
In which ways?
You know, I think my understanding of reality changed. Before that, and there was a little bit of sadness coming out of this ceremony, I'll be honest with you, because I felt like, how did I make it nearly 30 years with such a limited view of what this is?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, okay. That's not what I expected.
Yeah, I thought like,
I'm
oh my
36
God.
and I have no idea.
I've been living this life where I thought that that reality is just what we see in front of us and we can observe with our senses. And that took me to this place where there was so much beneath the surface. Like, imagine like an iceberg. It's like everything is below the surface. So that changed me. And I guess practically what that actually meant for me is it took the pressure off of life in a lot of ways. I realized that a lot of the things that I had been stressed over, anxious over, were not important. They were petty. And I realized that like this game is like this life is in a lot of ways a game. And it should be treated as such. It should be playful. We should enjoy it. We should laugh at it. And anytime I feel myself getting caught up in that old way, I try to remind myself of what I remembered about myself and reality in that experience. Because I do think of it as a remembering. I think that we all have that understanding when we come into the world. But we forget it. We get conditioned. We get normalized.
Do you think there's any way to know that intellectually without having it happen experientially? Like,
No.
Okay.
No, I don't. It doesn't have to be with drugs. I think you can experience it in a lot of different ways, but I think it does need to be learned through direct experience.
What do you think are the other outlets?
I mean, people have moments of spontaneous ecstasy through all sorts of different things. I think for a lot of people, it comes through doing something that they love. And that's a unique thing. That's like a personal thing, you know?
Totally.
I've had ecstatic moments with parenting, and I think that's a common one. You know, the birth of my son is probably the only other moment in my life to date that rivaled the emotional concentration of that first 5-MeO ceremony.
Did you tell your parents about it? And how was their response when you did, if you did?
I did. I told my dad about it.
What did he say?
He didn't say much.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool, son.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like tell him in the degree of detail that I'm telling you now, but I told him that I did it. And I think he just kind of like turned it back to his own experiences in college, experimenting with mushrooms and mescaline.
Oh, he has? Okay.
Yeah. He was at Harvard and he was class of 70. So it wasn't like peak Timothy Leary era, but it wasn't far after that. And actually, he was there when there was a semester-long student and faculty protest of the Vietnam War. So he had one semester where he just like smoked pot and went to museums.
Good for him.
Yeah.
So he had his shtick.
Yeah.
He had his moment.
He did.
Okay. So after this experience then, how did this change your life? Did you just completely decide to change directions with what you were doing in terms of like personal, professional, even like relational? Were you with your girlfriend, now wife at that time?
I was. Yeah.
Okay. How did that conversation go?
Yeah. Well, she was there with me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. She came with me. She was very supportive of it. And, what
was her perspective of this experience?
I think there was a little bit of FOMO.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And she ended up having her own ceremony later. But, and this is one of the reasons why I'm like so, like, I'm so big on like harm reduction. She had been on SSRIs for many years, you know, I think probably like diagnosed and prescribed as a teenager, like long time use. And there's like this risk of something called serotonin syndrome if you have prolonged use of SSRIs and you do psychedelics. They act on the same receptor in the brain, the 5-HT2A receptor. But they insisted that if she wanted to do a ceremony, which she did, that she taper off the medication because of that risk. And I think that we just got a little aggressive with that and tapered too quickly. And so she wasn't really stable enough to have that experience. So she had it, and she had an amazing, beautiful experience in the moment and was really grateful for it. But like many months down the road, it didn't integrate well. And we went, we were just like so aggressive with our spiritual practice. We were like doing all these mantras and meditations and stuff. And we went to a Vipassana meditation retreat, which is like a 10-day silent meditation. It's a big commitment.
10 days?
10 days of silence.
Wow.
Meditating constantly. And also you wake up at like 4 a.m. It's nuts. And she had what some might call a spiritual emergency there. Others might call it a psychotic break. But however you want to label it, we had to leave early. And she was having visions of entities that were really messing with her. Kind of like ancestral visions, like ancestral trauma kind of stuff coming up. And it's hard not to think that the Bufo ceremony had something to do with that.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is the...
She's okay now, by the way.
What is the psychology of a person that should do something like that? And what is the psychology of a person of somebody that shouldn't do something like that in terms of like psychedelics of any form, not even necessarily the one you're talking about? Yeah.
I mean, it's a tricky question, right? Because like right now there's a lot of attention around psychedelics as being tools for healing trauma, for healing depression, anxiety, you name it, like all these mental health applications. But I do think that in those situations, it's better to have like a much more intentional and careful surrounding container. In psychedelics, there's this concept of set and setting. It's like your set refers to the internal state of mind that you come into the experience with, and the setting refers to the external circumstances. And, for the most part, like the clinical trials, if we're talking about like the medical path, most of these studies use a psychedelic compound, but it's surrounded by psychotherapy. And there's like preparation sessions without medicine. Then there's the facilitated session where there's like, a clinician present, potentially guiding them, but more likely just kind of like allowing them to have their experience and making sure that they're safe. And then there's several sessions afterward of integration. And I think that that's really important for someone who has serious pathology. Now, I think it's very different if you're talking about someone who's looking for a tool for consciousness exploration. There you can probably be a little bit more rogue, and that was my experience. But I'm not a mental health professional, so what do I know?
I'm definitely more interested in the consciousness piece of it. I'll say I think I've told you, I've seen Tim Ferriss's panel every year for the past 3 years at South by. And the first time I saw him, which was 3 years ago, he was on a panel with 3 other like high PhD, very expert people that were studying, like clinical studying of psychedelics. Mm-hmm. The only reason Tim was there was because like he's just like, the fan in the cheap seats who essentially is like, yeah, I've done psychedelics, woo, woo, rah, rah, right? Like,
and he's also funded a lot of that research.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But like, just to say that of like, he's not the expert on the panel.
Right.
Let's just say that.
And he would admit that too.
For sure. And he did, right? He's like, I'm just here because like I'm a popular guy, not because like I'm an expert on psychedelics. Yeah. But they brought up something that has made me forever curious about it, and why I'm still curious about psychedelics in general today, is they use the analogy of that your conscious experience is basically that of like your foot on the floor, and everything subconsciously is like the floor of the entire room, right? Is like there is so much going on underneath that you have literally no idea.
Yeah.
And a lot of what those experiences allow you to do is to shine a flashlight on the basement that you've never been able to look at.
Yeah.
That is something I'm very interested in. Terrified, but also very interested and curious about it from that aspect. I've only ever done microdoses, which is great for just like creativity. I do it a lot for like
and like performance enhancement.
For sure.
But it's very different from like a therapeutic macro dose.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely validate that from my firsthand experience. And these different psychedelics have very different subjective experiences. Like for me, mushrooms are more so what you're describing, like bringing memories, ideas from the subconscious up to the surface so that you can engage with them directly. Right. The 5-MeO-DMT is like, it's so powerful that it skips right through that and you just go straight to that non-dual state. I don't think it's quite as therapeutic. I could be wrong about this. I mean, they're doing research to see, and clinical outcomes will, that's the end, that will settle the matter. But at least from my experience, it's like, if you want to engage with those difficult parts of yourself, like find the shadow, shine the light on it. It's kind of hard to do that with something that supercharged, but mushrooms, I've definitely had that experience. I had an ayahuasca sit recently for the first time, and a lot of family stuff came up there too.
Have you found it fruitful in terms of like, is it more beneficial or not beneficial when you find some of that stuff?
Oh, absolutely beneficial.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not comfortable, but it's beneficial.
Maybe that's the word. It's not comfortable, but it's beneficial.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so you had an amazing experience. Girlfriend was there. You decided to take a new path on life.
Yes, but not right away.
Okay.
I didn't have the framework for it or like the language for it at the time, but I think intuitively I just understood that these experiences, something as profound as that, needed time to marinate and process. Mm-hmm. I didn't know about integration, but that's basically the theme of that. But fortunately, I was already on a spiritual path, which is why I was there in the first place. So I brought my newfound insight into my teaching as a yoga teacher, but didn't make any rash life changes. It wasn't until many years later that I launched the newsletter.
And that's because it was, I think, 4 years later, right, when you officially launched it?
I launched Tricycle Day January of last year, 2023. So yeah, 4 years later.
And how long has the newsletter been around? 2023, so 10 years? No, 2023. 1 year. What?
Yeah, a year and 2 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's new.
And how many subscribers are you at now?
45,000 now.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
There's a lot of hunger for this information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know you, like everyone, started with 0, and now we're at 40,000+. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So walk us through that journey of the past year then. Like, what was the initial day like, and how have you changed, and what have you learned in that process of doing this for over a year now?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start by the opportunity that I saw and why I even felt like it was worth doing. So I had become like an avid consumer of psychedelic media ever since having my experience. I just became really interested and enthralled and wanted to stay up to date on what was happening in the space. And a lot had been happening, in like 2021, obviously macro conditions fostered this, but there was like a huge investment bubble. It was like a boom in psychedelics around the mental health side, like a lot of biotechs creating companies around potentially proprietary versions of psychedelic analogs and stuff like that. And I just, I saw like stuff is changing in this space, and it's interesting from a business point of view. It's also interesting from a cultural point of view. And that's why I became a consumer of media. But what I found was that, basically everybody was speaking to an audience. It almost felt like an echo chamber, like they were speaking to people who were already immersed. So it required a lot of like foundational knowledge that was not being made accessible. And there was like a lot of jargon, legalese, medical jargon too. That was like one option. And then the only other option that was really available that I saw was like individual content creators and influencers, if you will, who were speaking a totally other language, which was the woo-woo 5D consciousness stuff. And that also felt alienating to an everyday reader. So if you imagine like a bell curve, if there's like a spectrum of like different types of information, it felt like the big center chunk was just being completely left alone. And it was growing because, these days, like there are a lot of high profile, like mainstream media stories about psychedelics. And I think they're pretty one note. They lack a lot of nuance, but it shows that, that's a top of the funnel source for the ecosystem of psychedelic media, right? So more and more people were coming into the space, but there wasn't a place for them to land. So that really informed the brand and the voice of Tricycle Day. I said, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to break this information down in a way that cuts through the noise, tells them what's important, and does it in a way that is light, accessible, and fun.
What would you recommend to somebody else? let's say somebody wanted to start a newsletter and they were looking for opportunities.
Yeah.
You obviously found it. You obviously have been able to find opportunities at many businesses, from sparkling rocks for animals and everything in between. What are you looking for? Like, what's going through your brain when you're looking or finding these opportunities?
Well, the first one, I think, this is really important, is that it's something that you're going to be willing to keep going with.
Got it.
So there's got to be some level of genuine interest. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the topic area. For a newsletter, yes. For a content business, you got to be interested in the topic. But in something like crystal healing, it could be just that you're really interested in figuring out how to run e-commerce. You know, it could be that you're interested in that particular business model. So,
good advice.
Yeah. That's the first one. And then I think one of the reasons why Tricycle Day has been so successful is because I had a lot of tailwinds. You know, it's like the timing and understanding, like, there's a trend that's happening here. How can I ride it? Rather than having to create the whole trend myself.
How did you go from 0 to 1,000 subscribers?
The first 1,000 subscribers was mostly through brute force. I wrote the first newsletter without telling anybody about it. And just like had myself as the only subscriber. So I wrote it, sent it, and I received it. Just to like kind of like get over the hump and test it out, you know, get over the psychological hurdle of starting something new.
Had you already created all the branding and everything around it at that point?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I did create the branding around it already.
I mean, you had 4 years technically leading up to this of like a ruminating idea that you eventually wanted to do, correct?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, it's not like I was thinking about it and sitting on the idea. Like once I had the idea to do it and saw the opportunity, I just jumped on it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I sent the first issue to myself. And then once I was like, okay, yeah, I could see myself doing this. I can keep doing this. I reached out to like 10 or 15 friends who were also interested in psychedelics and said, I'm going to do a newsletter. You want to read it? And they all said yes, because they were my friends. And they subscribed. So then I had like 15 people I was sending newsletters to, and that felt like something I needed to stay accountable to, because now there are other people along for the ride. Then I got a big bolus of subscribers when I wrote to my yoga email list, which I had left dormant for like a year and a half, because I had not been teaching. And I sent them this like long email. Like I think the subject line was personal update, like so not copywriting. Although maybe that's kind of like maybe that's a hack somebody can use. I don't know. But it was just like everything that I had done over the past year and a half. And at the end, hey, I'm doing this new project. If you're interested in psychedelics, come check it out. I got like 300 or 400 subscribers from that.
How big was the yoga list?
Yoga list was 2,000 some.
That's a good turnout.
Yeah, a good percentage for sure. And then I think once I had those few hundred, that's when like the network effect started kicking in, and readers were referring other readers, and that's what took me to 1,000. Then once I got to 1,000, that's when I started running ads, and the growth took off.
How long does it take you to write a newsletter?
It takes a lot.
Is it just you writing it?
Yes.
You have no writers?
No writers.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've got 2 different types of issues. Wednesday, I do the roundup of news in psychedelic research, policy, and business. And Sunday, I do an interview. So they have very different processes to create those. The news one is something that I'm constantly reviewing what's happening and just collecting everything in a Trello board, organizing it, and then I write it on Monday, I edit it on Tuesday, and it goes out on Wednesday.
If you had not grown as much as you had, or it didn't continue to grow, let's say you were stuck at that first 300, it sounds like you had, would you have kept writing it? Would you keep writing it? Or would you just be like, this obviously isn't a smart business model, and you'd move on to the next thing?
Good question. When I first started, I was like, I don't care how fast it grows, because I have this natural curiosity, and creating this newsletter is going to give me an accountability structure to feed that curiosity. But if I were getting no traction whatsoever, and I were spending this much time on it, it would be really hard to justify that. So I would either have to sunset it completely or figure out a way to have it take up a lot less time.
How do you know when to quit a business or an idea, whether it's a newsletter, a podcast, a commerce, whatever it is?
Yeah, that's another tough question. I mean,
and I'm asking these questions honestly for myself.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know that there's like a science to that. Part of it is like, you lost the spark, if it just doesn't make you excited anymore. And I say that with some hesitation because obviously any business is going to have ebbs and flows. There are going to be moments where you feel not motivated. But I think there's something like, if you can be really honest with yourself, introspective, and say like, do I still want to do this? And that it's not just based on a fickle emotion of the day. And the answer to that is no, it's not meaningful to me anymore. It's time to hang it up.
Good advice. Where do you see it going? What's next for you in Tricycle Day and the business, I guess you could say?
The thing that I'm working on right now is that I launched a marketing agency on the back of it. Before that, the main revenue stream was sponsorships. So every issue has one ad placement, which sponsors pay for. And I thought, like, how can I serve those customers better? Because that's what's, paying for the business. And maybe there's a way I can serve them at a higher level. And so that the idea to do a marketing agency made sense. I have the background for it. I know the agency business, and they needed help. So I launched that in December.
What's the service? Is it emails?
That's part of it, but it's growth marketing for psychedelic retreats, clinics, and training programs.
That's specific.
Yeah. Well, those are the companies that actually are making revenue at this stage, so they can afford it. And they're looking to bring in more customers. And I mean, I could do gray market underground stuff, but that feels like assuming a level of liability and risk I'm not really comfortable with. I made that decision early on with sponsors too. I was like, I'm turning away leaving a lot of money on the table, but in the long term, I'd rather have, the peace of mind that my business is not going to get, not just the business, but I'm not personally liable for selling legal products. So that agency is like the current push right now, because it can make the business much more sustainable. And I can take profits from that and put it back into growth of the newsletter, and it's a flywheel that can keep spinning.
How do you stay up to date on your newsletter and what you talk about? Because it reminds me a lot of what The Hustle did with their newsletter, or still does, I guess, for that matter. Is they're always like ahead of the game, almost, I guess you could say, which feels very much so what you're doing with the psychedelic stuff. Yeah. How do you find that information?
Well, first of all, thank you for making that comparison, because that was intentional for sure. I was very inspired by The Hustle and Morning Brew. Just wanted to apply that to a more niche vertical.
Totally.
How do I stay abreast of what's happening? So it's a combination of things. There's like some really obvious things you can do, like setting up Google alerts for key terms. I do that. I also follow basically everybody who could be making news on social media, and I'm on mailing lists for companies that might be making news. I also follow other media platforms, because sometimes they find something I don't find. And I just round it all up in a Trello board, like I said, and then prioritize what's important to include. Because I think a big job of it is curating and distilling down, cutting out some of the fat. And the last thing I'll say about that is that the job that I see Tricycle Day doing is not actually breaking the news. I don't think it's so important I'd be the first person to report on something. And often I'm not, and I actually have to relax my nervous system if some breaking news happens on a Thursday, because I got a whole week before my next issue comes out, And I'm like, people are not subscribed to Tricycle Day because they need to know right now. They are subscribed to Tricycle Day because they want the roundup and they want to know what's important.
100%. Totally agree, my friend. I asked you, like I do all my guests, is I try to do a masterclass. You wrote down 3: discipline, writing, and growth. You can pick either one that you want, or any one that you want. But really what we're looking for here is, if you were to give just a college 101 of one of these topics in terms of what's your advice as to how to be good at any of these 3 that you chose, what would you tell them?
Okay. I guess I'll try to combine discipline and writing, where writing is one example of how discipline can be applied. So I think discipline in a lot of ways gets confused with motivation. I think I'll start there. Motivation is something that comes and goes. Discipline needs to be consistent. That's what makes it disciplined. So I think a big mistake that a lot of people make is relying on motivation to get things done. And Anybody who's done business or done anything hard will tell you that there are days where you don't want to show up and do the thing, but you have to anyway. So I think there are a few things that you can do to find that willpower. One is, and I'm just kind of like riffing, I'm like thinking off the cuff right now. One is to set up systems for yourself. I spoke about like how I do my newsletter and how I have like the Trello board and how like I have a day for each task involved in the process. I think that can be really helpful because it takes some of the mental load off of how do I get this like gargantuan goal done, and focuses you more on how do I show up today. I think that's a really important piece of it. Another aspect of discipline is keeping the end goal in mind, but not being so attached to making progress toward it, not in a measurable sense. I used to think about goals as this is the outcome that I want, and I've since changed my approach to that. I think it's great to dream about outcomes, and it's fun. It's like kind of like a treat almost, something to indulge in. But these days, when I think about goals, I actually think about them more in terms of commitments that I'm making. So for an example would be in the case of the newsletter, I could have set the goal like, I want to be at 100,000 subscribers by the end of year one. But instead of doing that, and like setting myself up for being disappointed or elated over a relatively arbitrary milestone, instead I said, I'm going to commit to writing this newsletter and publishing once a week, or it evolved into twice a week, every week for a year without missing that. And that's something that I actually have total control over. You don't have total control over the results, but you have total control over the inputs. And so I like to focus on things that I have control over. It's empowering. It gives you agency. And the opposite is, the converse is true when you attach your happiness to some outcome that's only partially within your control.
Totally agree, man. I don't know when that same thing happened in my psychology too, is doing, I call them process goals as opposed to outcome goals, but it's the exact same thing. I mean, this podcast show is a perfect example of that. It's like, yeah, I could have goals around certain numbers of downloads, but I don't have any control over that. The only thing I have control over is how many episodes I put out. So my goal is 52 episodes, which is one a week, right? Mm-hmm. So I love that framing, and people can do that with anything, right? Even if it's fitness or business or relationships, for that matters. Like, you can't control how much your spouse loves you, but you can control like how many dates you maybe do that year, right? Or how many nice words you say. That would be hard to track, but same concept.
100%.
I have a round of rapid fire questions. It's whatever the first thing is that comes to mind.
Okay.
What's your best business advice?
First-time founders focus on product. Second-time founders focus on distribution.
Okay, wait, what? You got to elaborate on that.
Okay. It's just this, I didn't make this up. I think maybe it was a Paul Grahamism or something, but it's the idea that, the naive entrepreneur thinks that creating the best possible product is the key to having a winning business.
Sure.
But once you've been through the ringer and realize that if people don't know about your product, it almost doesn't matter. The second time around, you say, okay, I need distribution. I need people who can hear my voice.
Totally. And the best way to do it is to build your own distribution like you did with a newsletter.
Yeah.
And then you can sell them any product.
Totally. That was a big part of doing the newsletter.
Love that. Great advice. Actually, Mudwater did a great job with that. I don't think Mudwater is anything special, but their distribution is incredible.
Mm-hmm. And Shane has like his own personal brand that's like really powerful too.
Best marketing advice. Might be the same thing.
I mean, that applies to marketing. But I think this is an oldie but a goodie. But do you know Super Mario marketing? Do you know that framework?
No.
Okay. So basically what it says is customers do not buy your product. They buy the transformation. They buy the better version of themselves that your product facilitates. So if you see like the little Mario, the mushroom, and the big, giant, strong Mario,
yes,
people try to sell the mushroom. You shouldn't sell the mushroom. Sell the big Mario.
I love that analogy. That's phenomenal. What's your favorite part about entrepreneurship?
even if it's potential, the potential freedom that it offers, the control over how you arrange your life.
Autonomy. When are you the most productive?
For me, the morning.
Who is your inspiration?
I mean, I try to find inspiration from everyone. That's a tough one. The first thing that's coming up, honestly, right now is my son.
Wow, nice.
Because he has so much awe and wonder for the world. That's something that happens with all children because they're experiencing many things for the first time. Everything is novel. But we have the ability as adults to find that energy too. So I'm inspired by that.
Tell me one secret or something most people don't know about you.
Okay. One thing that a lot of people don't know about me, although you knew that I was in the Harvard Crocodillos, but one kind of like fun fact around that is I was on a Korean like sketch comedy celebrity show. There's no correlate in American culture, but it was called Star King. We were on this show. It's like a major television show, almost like SNL meets Jimmy Fallon or something, singing with K-pop stars.
In Korea?
In Korea.
Why? Did they recruit you? Like, were you just there? Yoga?
No, this was through the Crocodillos.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we did. There's a world tour every summer with that group. That's part of the appeal of joining it. And of the 10 weeks, 7 were in Asia. And we spent quite a bit of time in Seoul, Korea, and we were on the show with SBS Studios.
This is what I was talking about when I said you're a hidden savage. As I started digging into you, I was like, who is this guy? What is happening right now? What would you change about yourself?
What would I change? You know, one thing that I'm working on with myself is being more open emotionally with the people in my life. So I am actively trying to change that.
What's your favorite app or resource right now?
I mean, one that's really important to me is Beehive. That's the web application I use to build and send Tricycle Day.
They sponsor you?
No, I pay for it.
I would have thought they would sponsor you. Running away or running towards something?
I am running toward freedom.
Love that.
Liberation, in many senses of the word.
What's your favorite part about Austin? And you can't say the people.
Outside of the people, I would say probably the size of it. It's like this Goldilocks size. I used to live in New York, and it was too big in some ways, like too dense. And then I lived in LA for a little while against my will and way too expansive. I love that Austin is a city. I feel like I have a handle on where everything is, but there's still like so many opportunities and different types of experiences here.
Great answer. I've not heard that one. I have one last question. Before I ask that question, I want to acknowledge you for so many reasons, Henry, for exploring your curiosities, for even trying to become an MD, but deciding that wasn't the path for you, for pushing your comfort zone to the extreme by eating some, what sounds like toad poison, and for making an amazing newsletter that now 40,000 plus people get to experience. So I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you very much.
For sure.
I received that acknowledgement.
Last question. It's really whatever your best piece of advice is. So if you were to go back to those original days of any of the businesses that you started, which it sounds like there's a plethora, or even the newsletter for that matter, and you were to give advice to your younger self as to how to make sure to focus on the right things, not to make foolish choices, like what would you tell your younger self or somebody else in that circumstance of just like ground zero, don't know what to do, don't know what to focus on?
Yeah. One that I have not mentioned already is I would advise, and I know that there are a lot of conflict. This is kind of like a hotly contested idea, but I would advise someone who wants to strike it out on their own not to do it prematurely and to maintain a stable job that allows you the freedom to explore. Because having the pressure of having to replace your income when the income is no longer there can rush you into maladaptive decisions. And it's nice to be able to have that real, like pure creativity in the beginning of starting something.
Cool. What's your plug? Where can people find you?
Tricycleday.com.
Sweet. Thanks for being on the show, brother.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey friend, thanks for listening to the show, and if you have any feedback for me about the show or any other guests that you'd want to see in the show, definitely shoot me a message. I love engaging with my audience and figuring out how I can provide the best value possible to the people listening to this show. Before you go, I only have one ask of you, and that would be to check out my 3 Tips Tuesday newsletter. It's 3 marketing tips every Tuesday specifically for the health and fitness entrepreneur to help them attract new leads. If you press the link in the description, it'll take you directly to the archive of all my previous newsletters, and you can decide for yourself if it's something for you. If you end up finding it helpful, you can just sign up for the newsletter and you'll get it in your inbox every Tuesday. Thanks again, and keep hustling, my friends.